How's everyone doing tonight? Welcome to Cup of Joe Live. Ooh, give me a little moment. Fix the lens here. There we go. Welcome to Friday evening. What are you guys doing on a Friday night? Hope you guys got something good planned. So, as you all know, like, share, comment. Please, folks, comment. I got my favorite topics. I beat them to death all the time. Go back through any of my videos, probably chances are you're going to find one or two that I've already covered. But let's go ahead and talk about an issue that we got. See if I can make this happen. Oh, man, no, it doesn't want to play nice. StreamYard's got an interesting reaction with regards to the way some things happen. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more creative here on this. But let's go ahead, and one of the things I want to talk about today is EPA. Reason why, big issue. It's one of the things that keeps coming up in relationship to... Hi, Jackie. Love you, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. My camera wants to be difficult. Okay. Let's try it again. There we go. That's much better. So, hi, Jackie. Thanks for joining me tonight. So, EPA. One of those big issues that always keeps coming up time and time again. Yeah, it's just ain't going to work quite the way I wanted it to. Anyway, so EPA. This was an issue that came up clear back, 1967. Particular photo that I'm looking at right here is the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio, 1967, back before the creation of the EPA and the Clean Waters Act. Now, the thing is Idaho had its own problem with pollutions with regards to the Boise River. Exact same issue. We had industries that were set up upstream, and they would just dump the waste into the river, and all of that waste would continue to float downstream. Now, these days, we look at the Boise River, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. You know, everybody goes swimming in it. Everybody goes rafting in it. You go out, hang out. You can actually eat the fish you catch in it. It's awesome. But a lot of this has to do with the way that we went in and, collectively, we used funds as Americans in order to set up the environmental protection and Superfund sites so that we could go in and clean up these environmental disasters that were created by, a number of businesses. Part of the problem was we hadn't gotten into the practice of holding industry responsible for the externalities associated with their industry. One of those is like, you have a slaughterhouse along the river, and the slaughterhouse just dumps all of the animal blood into the river and animal waste into the river. It creates a problem downstream. But we weren't holding the slaughterhouse responsible for the cleanup. One of the advantages of being able to set up and, do business along the river was just, throw the waste and it all floats away. Now, that same problem created other issues because we actually had junkyards that were along the river, and an awful lot of organizations and industries that was just waste disposal. Throw it in the river, throw it in the river, throw it in the river. Now, it took years to get around to cleaning up the Boise River. Same with Cuyahoga. The problem was we didn't hold industry responsible for the externalities of their business. And that's one of those things that should be a local issue, right? A local community realizes, hey, I like the Boise River clean. Who's polluting it? Well, then they should be able to go upstream and say, we're not cool with what you're doing to our river. Yeah, that would have been all the stakeholders. That would have been a class action suit. Everybody downstream in Boise, everybody who likes to float it, environmental tourism like the Barber Dam rafting. Believe it or not, rafting the Boise River is environmental tourism. Yes, ecotourism. Same thing we do with all the other rivers here in the state of Idaho. Payette, salmon, rafting tours all the time. Most of those rivers right now, at least up until recently, were some of the cleanest, freshest rivers we've had in the state of Idaho since we've gone through and done an awful lot of research. Now, we got other things, and this gets back to our issues with appropriate environmental management. As an individual, I've gotten into it with who enlightened me about issues of river dredging. Well, river dredging actually reduces the amount of heavy metals that are associated with the rivers, which of course then get into the fish that we then eat. So dredging actually does something for the rivers that doesn't happen on its own anymore. Used to be we had enough megafauna roaming the forest, who do the wading across the river, create turbulence upstream, other things that would cause turbulence that would force those heavy metals to continue to circulate and, leave the environment. Or we had a better watershed that kept most of that heavy metals locked into the mountainside, and the heavy metals would be caught before they actually reach the river. None of these things currently happen because of current bad environmental management policies that have been in effect since, 1976. So we got a blessing and a curse at the same time. We got the blessing in that we collectively went in and cleaned up, a century of bad environmental management. But at the same time, we ended up going the other way because a lot of the policies weren't completely thought out, and we didn't have a large enough scale to actually test the theories behind those policies against what was going on. So here we are, EPA 1976, somewhere around there. So 45 years. Yeah, 45 years later. 45 years later after the EPA was passed, and the EPA was basically about the Clean Waters Act. We are now catching the fallout from improperly thought out environmental policies back in Washington, D.C. Mainly, take a look at what's going on with forest fires all across the western United States, wilderness fires, boom, all the way up and down the coast. A lot of that has to do with bad environmental practices. Got it. So how do we go in and correct that situation? Now, of course, one of the reasons why we went with the EPA approach was because we were trying to regulate industry that was being ran by slash and burn corporations. Okay, so how do we create a situation where we have better forest management that allows true conservation, and that we can go on in and economically manage and environmentally manage, these resources for conservation and for environmentalism in a way that's positive without turning it over to slash and burn corporations? Good question. I don't have an answer for you, other than the fact that, it needs to be done. The reason why is because right now the environmental policies that are 45 years old are having as disastrous effect as the policies that they replaced, which was, let industry do what it will. So we need to come up with a better methodology. This basically means that, land rights. How do we affect land rights? Well, you shouldn't be able to do anything on your land that affects your neighbor. Killdozer. Yep. Trevor, drinking water better. brain cancer from bad water. We got bad water all over the place. Some of that has to do with places like Flint, Michigan. We're drinking lead poisoned water just like the Romans did, 2,000 years ago. The reason why is because, lead was cheap. Nobody really thought that much about it. So we made lots of pipes out of lead. Well, a lot of that lead piping is deteriorating and it's getting into our water, and we actually run into issues like Flint, Michigan. We have that problem in Boise right now. Suez Water Company is trying to flush out an awful lot of our pipes. A lot of those pipes have corrosion in them that's old. So how do we deal with that? Well, we can either do better at filtering the water at our tap, or we need to, go in and actually replace all of that infrastructure with something that's cleaner. Not exactly a cost-effective mode of business. But when you're dealing with large populations, a lot of infrastructure, utility infrastructure, yeah, city's got to do a better job of managing that. The question is do you want to go ahead and go on back to individual wells, which affects water table level, or do you want to continue to try and manage city water? Now, an awful lot of people don't like city water, which is why they moved out into the suburbs where they could actually drill their own wells, which of course hits the water table and too many people who run everything off of, whereas if you're doing a collective where you're actually working with city water and doing the recycling of the water. Yes, the recycling of the water. It is a thing. That is what waste treatment facilities do, which is also another problem that we're having right now here in the state of Idaho, particularly with regards to Boise, is because Boise is too big for our waste treatment facilities. Imagine that. We grew too fast to handle the amount of shit we produce. Anyway, so Boise's got some real nice waste treatment facilities. We actually process an extreme amount. But the idea is the water that a boil ban. I hope that means they're supposed to boil their water rather than they can't boil their water. But yeah, no, Idaho City, the water table's been contaminated, or if the city water's been contaminated, it's got the E. coli and it's got all the other stuff. You actually got to boil it so you can drink it. Remember, if you're going to boil your water to drink it and then put ice in it, make sure the ice was started as boiled water. Okay. Yeah, you have to boil it. Boil it. Boil your water that you're going to turn into ice too. Otherwise, you don't actually solve the problem. One of those things you learn about third world countries. Boil the water that you turn into ice before. It saves you Montezuma's revenge. But the problem we got here in Boise is right now, the navigable water contexts don't include the canals. So we have canal districts. Boise's in the process of trying to renew one of their contracts with the canal district so that the waste treatment facilities can discharge the excess effluents, the stuff that they can't actually treat because it's more than its capacity, into the canal water, which then contaminates everything downstream. You grow up in Idaho. We grew up playing in the canal. We go swimming in the canal. Probably one of the reasons why Corona hasn't killed a lot of us yet. Because 40 years ago, when you go playing in the canal, you were playing in manure, DDT, Basically, all the pesticides were washed off of the plants into the canal, or straight off of the farm. Uh, yeah. Dude, you think back about the actual context of the stuff that some of us grew up in, and we go, damn, how are we not dead? Um, that said, right, right, Jackie? How are we not dead considering the context of the world we grew up in? Swimming in a canal laced with pesticides and animal waste, and yeah, I seriously, 40 years of exposure that, should have killed us, man. Should have, straight up. Um, you know, I'm lucky. I have a grandfather, spent 40 years doing work with DDT, industrial farmer out in Waihee County, out by Homedale, Oregon, or Homedale, Idaho. 40 years. He was 87 before he came close to anything that remotely resembled some sort of, disease associated with the amount of chemicals. I got good genes, thank God. It's my only excuse for still being alive after the way I grew up. But that's one of the things we're looking at. How do we hold industry responsible? So like Idaho, Boise. If the canal district goes ahead and renews the contract and all of that effluence goes on downrange, goes on downstream through the canals before it goes out somewhere other side of Meridian and actually drops back into the Boise River, which was the reason they were putting it into the canal in the first place, was so it wouldn't go into the river. All those yards downrange, all the kids who play alongside the canal, that particular canal downrange, they're now exposed to higher particulate counts of E. coli and salmonella, as well as whatever else went into that water, including estrogen from birth control pills. All of your chemicals, all the things went into the water. Everybody downrange is getting exposed to it. Wow, it's a scary thought. I never really put much thought into. Used to go out and play in those canals before everybody was on birth control pills. So estrogen wasn't exactly something I got a heavy exposure to as a result. But now, who knows? Who knows what's in the canal water these days? At least it's not DDT, right? We got Roundup. There you go, Roundup. Go out swimming in the canals, drink a gallon of Roundup in the process. Dude. But back to the issue. Environmental policy, environmental control. What we need to do, and this is individual communities. The reason why is because I don't think the federal level has a good response to this. If an individual community is dealing with a situation where an industry is polluting its environment, whether it's water, drinking water from the water table, whether it's rivers, some other environmental impact, the things that affect us collectively downstream or downwind. We need to do a better job of holding those industries responsible at the local level. And that means civil actions, civil suits, local watchdog organizations. Because Bunker Hill Mining Company, Bunker Hill Mining Company, they were in violation of a policy with regards to their filters. They knew they were in violation. But there was no federal organization there to perform the watchdog requirements necessary in order to prevent them from burning for months in their process, creating pollution all through the Bunker Hill community. As a result, there was close to a year where their processors were running at max capacity and just dumping lead residue all over the community because the filters on the processors weren't working. They weren't stopping the lead from entering the air. So lead particles literally coated the community, affecting an entire generation of children who grew up in the Bunker Hill community. And this is one of those situations where literally corporate, who had no responsibility to the community whatsoever, was poisoning the children of the employees who worked the mines and the smelters. Then they filed bankruptcy and they weren't even held responsible for what they did. The U.S. government ended up picking up the slack again. So we need to do a better job at the local level. Especially once we understand the nature, because every industry has its own peculiarities. You can't just create this, blanket policy back in DC. Your community stakeholders need to do a better job of paying attention to what's going on. So, environmentalists, stop lobbying DC. Pay attention to what's going on in the community and make sure the community is aware. I know there are activists who are doing that all across the United States right now. We got activists right here in Boise, right here in Idaho, that are actively involved in countering fracking. Fracking here in Idaho that was made possible due to ALEC legislation that created a blanket policy so that Idaho's legislation about fracking mirrored every other state that allowed fracking. We got lucky here in Idaho, and the companies that came in to frack the place found out real quick there's nothing here to frack. Hate it for you. The senators and legislators that signed off on that because you thought it was a good business deal and investment. Congratulations. I'm glad you got financially screwed for the level of treachery you were about to dish out to the Idaho people. Because you were. You were looking at short-term profits for yourself at the expense of the health and welfare of your constituency. Wish I could name names. But I know. And that's the reason you blessed off on that contract. It's because you were hoping to get rich. Belly up. Yeah. But that's another situation where the investors involved in fracking Idaho literally needed, and this is another problem we got with regards to another issue, and that is nature protectionism. Should corporations be held accountable for the toxic gases that they release into the atmosphere? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Reason why is because if we allow a process that affects the environment to everybody's detriment to continue to persist, sooner or later the community becomes responsible for cleaning it up. Now, it's better to clean it up at the point of origin, at the time it's created, than trying to go back later and fix the situation. One of the examples that you take a look at with that is the hydrocarbons that depleted the ozone layer. And we had understood what was happening with the hydrocarbons and the ozone layer, early on in the process, and corrected the situation as soon as we found out about it. We wouldn't have spent the next 30 years trying to rebuild the ozone layer in a way that would have been healthy for, the world. So, Aquanet, it's no longer a thing. Several other forms of hydrocarbon, and we've actually gone in and changed the makeup of not just hairspray, but a lot of the other processes that we do. The coolants, the fluids that we use for air conditioners used to be one of those things that if it was released into the air would cause. So we changed an awful lot of those things. As a result of the last 30 years, we've been able to repair the ozone layer so that we don't have to be, so that our re-terraforming, interesting way to change that phrase, so that the re-terraforming of the planet, we don't need to be as extensive with it. So one of the things an awful lot of people like to talk about is let's go ahead and see what you got here. I might want to regulate the molecules. Okay. See, so that one's an interesting thing. And my physics engaged young son there, they actually have an awful lot of measuring devices out right now that are capable of measuring the types of molecules as well as the atoms, that leave incinerators and smokestacks and other treatment facilities as fast as they leave. So you have people out there with it's like the IR reflective, or not the IR, but the light reflective things, the spectrometers. Yes, spectrometers. So they have so a lot of the watchdog agencies, especially when they're dealing with a major corporation that has a real problem with pollution, and they like to cheat every so often by turning off their filters when they want to go into a heavy burn, because it's more cost effective to turn off the filters and do a heavy burn and let everything into the air and take the $10,000 fine for letting it burn for a day than it is to keep it on and do a steady state. It preserves their filters longer, even though it creates more pollution in the air. So there's actually industries that have gone in and created this. Okay, we got enough extra, we need to do a heavy burn, turn off the filters so we don't burn out the filters, and we'll pay the $10,000 fine to the local Department of Environmental Quality. Well, that's one of those situations where you got a watchdog agency that's actually sitting outside of those incinerators, outside of those locations with a spectrometer, and that spectrometer is able to measure the amount of pollutants that are being dispersed by the smokestack at the time. Now, this is a recording, so the recording turns around and it goes back. This watchdog's recording of what goes on is what goes into the Department of Environmental Quality and says, okay, they've exceeded the limit, so fine them. Unfortunately, the Department of Environmental Quality has a ceiling on what they can fine the industry, fine the factory for the amount of pollutants that they put into the air for the day. Cost of doing business. It's one of the problems you run into with regards to barriers to entry. Reason why is because it doesn't matter whether you slightly exceed or grossly exceed the capacity of pollutants put into the air. Most Department of Environmental Qualities have a ceiling on what the payment can be. So if you're a small-time operation that exceeds the quantity even a little, boom, you pay the same amount, same fine as if you're one of those agencies or organizations that exceeds it by a ton. Which means that the little ones that actually reduce less pollution are put out of business, while the big ones get more because they pick up the market share of the ones that can no longer afford to operate. So one of the things you actually need to do is go in and change the way that is regulated so that the industries are actually charged by the tonnage of their pollution rather than by the hour or day they pollute. But when those industries are the ones that are creating the barriers of entry because they have the stronger lobby, because the lobby is just the cost of doing business, starts getting significantly harder to go in and rewrite those rules in the Department of Environmental Quality as well as Environmental Protection Agency. So one of the things that you actually need to start looking at is if you change the rules, or even one of the cases you look at from a libertarian perspective, if you go in and because right now we don't actually hold anybody criminally liable when they're part of a corporation. The people who make the decisions to create these environmental hazards are protected under the limited liability of the corporation, or they've got a shield, a barrier, so that we can't actually put them in prison for when they create environmental hazards that kill people. And their personal finances aren't affected either because, again, the actions of the corporation, even though they were involved in the decision for the actions, they're one level removed and they're not personally affected by the decisions they make. Now, if we go in and we remove some of those protections for the corporations so that executives within the corporations can be held responsible for decisions made, in their name, on their behalf, by them in particular, as well as a situation where you remove the Department of Environmental Quality that can only fine them based on the amount for the time that they do the pollution. I can't remember, man. I think I actually bought this in Hawaii when I went to Hawaii on one of my training deployments. And thank you. I appreciate that, Cameron. So, regulating the molecules. One of the things is if we remove the Department of Environmental Quality and we actually start allowing civil action, civil suits to be taken, because that's one of the other things the Department of Environmental Quality did and the Environmental Protection Agency is it took the stakeholders out of the equation. It became an issue between the corporation and the government. And of course, the government that was bought by the corporation to render the decision. Yeah. So if we actually were to remove the Department of Environmental Quality at the state levels and the Environmental Protection Agency up at the federal level, and these watchdog agencies were able to start paying attention again to what's going on and reporting them and forming class action suits that weren't being filtered through the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Environmental Quality, they'd be able to take them to court and actually sue them for the entirety of their cleanup, which unfortunately would probably result in bankruptcy for an awful lot of these corporations that are persistent. But it's one of those things where we'd have to work to find a balance. But as it is right now, we are much better than we were in 1976 when the when the Environmental Protection Agency was created. But that's because we weren't at war at the time, and we had the excess money to go in and create the Superfund sites and pay to go in and clean those up after industries had created completely toxic environments. Nowadays, well, we don't have the money for Superfund sites because we're paying for war. We're also not doing another cleanup. But the thing is if we were to go back into the situation eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency, eliminate the Department of Environmental Quality, allow the watchdog agencies to sue on behalf of the communities in which are being destroyed by excessive pollutants. We'd be able to go in and get judges to institute, bars against environmental damage or, affecting those individuals downrange, downwind, downstream. Because I think that was one of those other things that we were doing back in 1976, which we sort of stopped doing after the Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency went through. If somebody was creating a situation that was detrimental to the individuals downwind, downstream, or otherwise, or downhill in some cases, civil suit was allowed. Now, we stopped holding them responsible via civil suits, tort claims for damages done. We simply turned it over to the Department of Environmental Quality and the EPA to say, well, what's a good fine for what they did to the neighbor? Never mind the fact that the neighbor now has lung cancer. Now, the state's responsible for the lung cancer rather than the individual, rather than the industry that created the situation that caused the lung cancer. So get back to where we have more watchdog agencies, more watchdog organizations are paying attention to what's going on. We also create the opportunity for other forms of industry and technology, the disruptive technologies that come out. They're capable of dealing with those pollutants in a way more efficiently, more effectively than the established big businesses do. So if somebody comes out and, there's a slight overage, they're not damaged the same way as they would have been under the previous EPA or DEQ rulings. It's one of the things. We got plenty of ways to actually measure the molecules that are coming out of those industries, either in the air, in the water, or saturating the ground. Matter of fact, if you go to NASA's got a nice little chart where they chart all of the wind patterns around the world. You have to share it sometimes. See if I can find it. Friend Natalie likes to look at it all the time. But yeah, no, we have the means of doing the measuring. Spectrometers, other forms of analysis that are available out there, how they were able to figure out how deep the lead penetration of the lead particles were in Bunker Hill. They have a way of going in and doing that. Measuring what comes in the water as well. Individual I know over in eastern Idaho likes to run around with his radiometer checking for uranium waste disposal. Yeah. Believe it or not, we actually got a problem with that in eastern Idaho back before we actually had to come up with a legitimate, way. We were just taking the uranium dust and just letting it go. Turns out that wasn't the best for some of the communities. That dust, that dirt ended up getting blown into. Is what it is, folks. So, excellent. You got any other questions? I've only been doing this for 40 minutes. It's not bad for a Friday night. Talk to me. Sorry, I can't answer your question any better than that, Cameron. Love the spacesuit. But no, we need to do a better job of holding the corporations accountable rather than tasking the United States government or the local communities with the cleanup. It's one of those situations where right now we actually got a circle jerk going on in a couple different locations. Reason why is because like the Gulf Coast cleanup. British Petroleum went in and they actually polluted the entire coast. And as a result, they ended up doing a subdivision. They created their own cleanup company that they were then responsible for paying to do the cleanup but they were also collecting federal funds for the cleanup, so they were actually getting paid to clean up their own mess by the U.S. government. Okay, that's literally creating a situation for, they're profiting off of a bad situation that they created. And U.S. government via Superfund sites and various other donations ended up paying this company. And thing is if the company failed to actually do the cleanup, the company just filed bankruptcy after all of the profits had already been shipped up to the parent corporation. I don't call that a win. It's another one of those situations where we need to do a better job of making sure that companies that are awarded cleanup for misbehavior of industries and corporations aren't associated with the decision makers that were involved in creating the problem or the corporations themselves. No more of these little blind corporation things. And the individuals responsible for doing the cleanup actually need to be completely separate entity and paid as such. We need to stop paying people for making mistakes. There are no bailouts in capitalism, folks. No bailouts in capitalism. And it's what we've been doing for the last 40 years now. We've been bailing out corporations. We've been rewarding bad behavior with more money. How do we create a situation in the United States where you get paid to make a mistake? That's where we're at right now. We are paying people to make mistakes. We are paying people to fail. We are paying people, and I'm not talking tiny little household fail. I'm not talking individual person fail. I'm talking major industry fail. Auto industry, the auto industry bailout. Okay. 2 of the 3 failed. Literally, straight up failed. We had to bail them out. One of them didn't take the bailout money. The other 2 did. Okay. If we just let the other 2 fail, well, one, Tesla would be doing a lot better right now than the other 2, which right now isn't the situation because those other 2 are still muscling Tesla out of the automotive industry. Tesla would have been able to pick up more market share. Ford would have picked up more market share until other entrepreneurs could have created alternative forms. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you. Nice vote of confidence. But yeah. Ford would have picked up more market share. Tesla would have picked up more market share. Certain other companies, Toyota would have picked up more market share, actually. Toyota's been doing good. A lot of the standards that they set for Japan, they brought over, they set with their U.S. vehicles. Higher mileage, lower output, better filters. We won't even talk about Volkswagen and their diesel engines because that was shenanigans. But if we step back and we take a look at what's going on, where we stop rewarding failure, if industries, the corporations and the industries they're associated with screw things up bad enough, it needs to cost. It does. Their bad decisions need to cost them, not the communities, not society, not our government. I think is literally, it needs to cost them. They need to go bankrupt. The decision makers associated with causing the bankruptcy need to go back to middle management where they belong, where somebody with better judgment can sit over their shoulder and tell them, no, bad idea. That's what we need to do. We need to get back to, because right now, Chrysler, right now, they're doing the exact same thing that they were doing before. The stuff they said they would stop doing if we bailed them out, they're doing it again. Yeah, the banks, the stuff they said they would stop doing when we bailed them out, in 2000, as that was 2008. That was a housing crisis. Okay, the things we told them to stop doing if we bailed them out, they're doing again. They went back into Congress and they lobbied so that they could start doing the stuff that caused the problem again in the first place. Okay. I got it. Okay. We can't do the regulation thing. Reason why is because regulations are all temporary. All it takes is 6 months, and a regulation that we put in place, some lobbyist somewhere has convinced us to roll out regulation back. So stop trying to create regulations. What we need to do is just stop rewarding bad policy. We need to stop rewarding failure. We need to stop bailing industries and organizations out for mismanagement. Yeah, I think that's ultimately the best thing we can do as far as managing those corporations. When they create toxic environments, when they create failure, is literally take them to court. And if necessary, bankrupt them for their failure to take care of the community that they established those businesses and industries in. Yeah, because obviously regulating them isn't getting the job done. Stop bailing them out. Sue them when they screw up. Literally take them down, pauperize them. Get judges who support the community, can't be bought by the industries. They're saying, nope, that cancer case is only worth 10,000, not 100,000 or 10 million. Communities need to do better with their judges anyway. And take a look at some of the stuff we got going on. Idaho, what the hell is going on with your judges? I mean, literally, you let an 18-year-old rapist walk because his dad was well connected. Yeah. Send his 18-year-old ass back to Texas. Why? Because you didn't want to deal with him here? Dude, no. We need to do better locally at holding our judges responsible too. Reason why is because the judges are the ones that we trust, we appointed to look out for our special interests, to look out after the interests of the community, to be that arbiter of justice, that mediator that says, okay, this is fair, this is an understandable under the given circumstances, that this is the debt that one person owes another. Yeah, absolutely not okay. What some of our judges have done with justice, in America, in the state of Idaho, is the Ada County DA. Let's go ahead and talk about the Ada County DA. Wanted to pursue felony charges against a truck driver for delivering hemp from one state to another state, not even in Idaho. He was just crossing Idaho, just going through. Wasn't going to make a stop and offload any of his stuff, just driving through. It was legal in the state of origin. It was legal in the state of destination. It was federally legal. But we have a DA that, because this guy crossed into our state, decided that 6,000 pounds of hemp was felony marijuana trafficking. And our judges let her get away with that. Yeah. It sucks. She's the incumbent. She's a Republican. Her far more reasonable opponent still carries a D. He's a Democrat. I honestly wish there had been a libertarian running for the DA position. God, right? Libertarian would have looked at that and went, you know, I don't think I'm going to enforce that law because I think that law is stupid. We might have actually had a legalized marijuana sanctuary city in the state of Idaho, at least until a state legislature reconvened. Our state legislature isn't real fond of individual counties taking it upon themselves to decide, you know, what they're going to enforce and what they're not going to enforce. But would have been good for a month. Would have been good for a month. Which, by the way, Black Lives Matters out there. Defund the police, folks. You knew better than to approach that particular DA with the idea of making Boise a sanctuary city for marijuana. You knew better. Why you went to her and made it a demand. We demand you make Boise a sanctuary city for marijuana. Yeah, that's why you got laughed out of the office. No, take some time. It's an election year. Twilliger is going to be more responsive to that. Like I said, I would have preferred a libertarian be the one making that decision. Because a libertarian probably would have done it all on their own. The reason why is because libertarians don't believe in the war on drugs. We've been fighting it since 72, folks. We've been fighting Nixon's war on drugs since 1972. We've been fighting government segregation since 1972. We've been fighting for LGBTQ rights since 1972. We've been fighting to give power back to the people since 1972. DNC and GOP both took GOP never had it on their ballot, but the DNC took legalization of marijuana off of their platform this year. Took it off. You know, we have riots across the United States right now in every, okay. 93% of the demonstrations are without riots, without violence. Okay, 93 peaceful protest. 93% of the protests for defund the police across the United States are peaceful. There's places where it's turned violent. They have a distinct problem with over-policing the communities, and the reaction of the police in a lot of those situations actually created the violence rather than de-escalating the situation. So an awful lot of those people who are saying, well, 7% were violent. Well, dude, a lot of those 7% were related to police actions that caused an escalation in the demonstrations and the protests rather than a de-escalation that would have allowed a simple peaceful protest to occur and move on. Okay. But God, I love the squirrels I got running around in the background. Squirrel. Hey. But that defund the police thing you're talking about, with Black Lives Matter and other organizations. And Libertarian Party's been fighting for that since 1972. Your right to protect your community, community policing. The Libertarian Party has been fighting for that since 1972. These are platform realities of the Libertarian Party that have stood the test of time. We haven't changed them. We haven't updated them. Your rights. The United States government and the states should not be writing any laws in any way, shape, or form that infringe upon individual rights. Your rights as a transgender individual. Human rights. State of Idaho should not be writing laws about that. Shouldn't. The United States government shouldn't be writing laws about that. It's an issue of privacy. It's a lifestyle choice. The United States government should not be writing laws and regulations about that. Just like we never should have allowed the Jim Crow laws to exist. We never should have allowed sundown town laws to exist. That was a violation of individual human rights. 1972, folks. That's how long we've been fighting this. Trust us. We know a thing or two by now. Okay. It's been an hour. I'm down to... So it's probably just you and me right now, Jackie. It's all right. Some other people will be able to come back and take a look at this in a little while. But EPA, absolutely. We need to get back to allowing individual judges to sue class action suits. Erin Brockovich. We need to be doing Erin Brockovich level stuff, the community level, for those industries who go in. And literally, we have the testing ability right now. And the testing ability is dirt cheap in an awful lot of these situations. Every community that's been fracked. Okay. There's a rule by the EPA that allows them to do that and get away without any consequences. The community can't even sue for the damage done by fracking because of the way that we've set up the EPA and its governing bodies these days. So, well, an awful lot of people right now, what do we do about the EPA? We need the EPA in order to save us, to save us, to save us. The EPA is what's allowing the current pollution that is occurring. Nice. Got something going on in the backyard. Love you guys. Take care of each other. Remember, family, friends, community. Stand together. You can beat anything. Love you guys.